Patel's proposals to save Tibet. The Himalayas are a God given gift to India, the abode of the rishis and the origin of her rivers. The Himalayas are not only India's crown of glory, but they also have served her for centuries as a protecting shield extending right across her northern borders, from the Nanga Parvat in Kashmir to the Namcha Barwa in the eastern India. But in 1962, the Himalayas' impregnability was breached by the Chinese. None could have imagined that they would invade India from across her northern borders. Nehru suffered the rudest shock because of his implicit faith in Chinese friendship. In deep anguish, he said, "How I worked for friendship between India and China, fought for the Chinese legitimate interests in the world, and aggression was my reward." Patel kept quiet because his advice was ignored. Could that have been avoided? Patel had answered that as early as in 1950, when China threatened India's territorial integrity in her Himalayan states. Thousands of copies of a map were distributed in Sikkim and other Himalayan regions. The map showed Tibet and China as the palm of the human hand, and Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and Nepal as its 5 fingers. Patel had foreseen China's designs far back as June 1949 when he wrote to Nehru, "We have to strengthen our position in Sikkim as well as in Tibet. The farthest we keep away from communist forces, the better." Tibet has long been detached from China. I anticipate that as soon as the communists have established themselves in the rest of China, they will try to destroy its autonomous existence. His advice to Nehru was, "You have to consider carefully your policy towards Tibet in such circumstances and prepare from now for that eventuality." In November 1950, a month prior to his demise, Patel attended a cabinet meeting called to discuss Tibet. Nehru's mood was petulant. He snubbed Envy Gadgil with the remark, "Don't you realize Himalayas are there?" Whereupon K.M. Munshi ventured to say, "In the 7th century, Tibetans had crossed to Himalayas and invaded Kannauj." Nehru dismissed this as a nonsense. Immediately after that meeting, Patel left for Ahmedabad, but he continued anxiously thinking over the problem. On his return to New Delhi, he wrote a letter to Nehru on 7th November, which, according to Munshi, showed Patel's uncanny vision in discerning as far as back in 1950 the portents across our northeastern border and the dangerous implications of our foreign policy in that direction. Every word of what he wrote has been proved true by developments of the past 17 years. Patel had written to Nehru. The Chinese government had tried to delude us by professions of peaceful intentions. My own feeling is that at a crucial period they managed to instill into our ambassador a false sense of confidence in their so-called desire to settle the Tibetan problem by peaceful means. The final action of the Chinese, in my judgment, is little short of perfidy. The tragedy of this is that the Tibetans put faith in us. We have been unable to get them out of the meshes of the Chinese diplomacy or the Chinese malevolence. It appears that we shall not be able to rescue the Dalai Lama. Patel tried to convince Nehru, the Chinese do not regard us as their friends. and their last telegram to us is an act of gross discourtesy. Not only in the summary way it disposes of our protest against the entry of Chinese forces into Tibet, but also the wild insinuation that our attitude is determined by the following influences. It looks as though it is not a friend speaking in the language but a potential enemy. Patel further warned Nehru, very soon they, the Chinese, will disown all their stipulations which Tibet had entered into us in the past. That throws into melting pot all frontier and commercial settlements with Tibet, which we have been functioning and acting during the last half a century. China is no longer divided, it is united and strong all along the Himalayas. The undefined state of the frontier and the existence on outside our side population with its affinities to Tibetans or Chinese have all the elements of potential trouble between China and ourselves. Chinese ambitions in this respect not only cover the Himalayan slopes on our side but also include the important parts of Assam. The danger from the north and northeast, therefore, becomes most crucial. Patel suggested that a number of positive steps, which included improvement of road, rail, air, and wireless communications with Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, Darjeeling, and the tribal areas in Assam, building of defensive lines, policing and intelligence frontier posts to stop infiltration of the spies, fifth colonists and communists, and fully manning the outposts and ensuring loyalty of the people inhabiting the region concerned. Earlier in 1901, India's confrontation over Tibet had been with Russia. Now it was with China. Curzon, the viceroy, had confirmed, clarified the British positions, which approximated Patel's thinking, though Curzon's language was of an imperialist and empire builder. Like Curzon, Patel did not desire the occupation of Tibetan territory, and his views was that of Curzon's, who had stated, "Of course we do not want their country. It would be madness for us to cross the Himalayas and occupy it, but it is important that no one else should seize it, and that it should be turned into a sort of buffer state between the Russians and the Indian empires. If Russia were to come down to the big mountains, she would at once begin intriguing with Nepal, Tibet, not Nepal, but also Tibet. Must be the buffer that we endeavor to create. Unpreparedness and vacillating on the Nehru's part, lasting for more than a decade, could not rescue the Dalai Lama, nor could he avoid humiliation in his defeat in the Indo-Chinese War of 1962. He did not follow Patel's advice, and the result is something which history is witness of and which we are all facing.